Millionaire tests his humble cooking at a luxury party, but what happens next changes his life. The aroma of roasted peppers and golden garlic wafted up and down busy Mulberry Street in the heart of Little Italy, New York. Claire Bennett adjusted the small portable stove as a considerable queue formed in front of her modest street food stall. Her deft fingers danced between pans and spices with the precision of years of practice, but her mind was elsewhere, on the old leather-bound recipe book she had found in her late mother's attic just 3 months ago. "Another portion of the ragu alla napolitana, please," shouted a regular customer, and Claire smiled, coming back to the present. The book had changed her life. The handwritten recipes, annotated in the margins in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting, had turned her small street business into a local phenomenon. What had begun as a way of surviving after losing his job in a restaurant during the pandemic became his passion and salvation. Across town, in the luxurious Luminescence restaurant, Michael Reed massaged his temples while staring at his computer screen. The reservations for that evening were full, as always, but something was bothering him. His 5 restaurants were unquestionable commercial successes, but lately he felt his food lacked soul. Recent reviews, although still positive, were beginning to mention words like predictable and safe. Mr. Reed, his assistant Melissa Wilson, hurried into his office. "Chef Anderson just called. He had a car accident on the way to tonight's charity event." Michael felt his stomach sink. The Hartford Foundation's charity event was crucial, not only because of the money raised for children's hospitals, but also because of the presence of important investors and food critics. "How much time do we have?" "4 hours, sir." Michael picked up his phone, quickly scrolling through his contact list, when an Instagram notification caught his eye. It was a viral post by a local food influencer about a food stall in Little Italy. The video showed people ecstatically tasting something that looked like a traditional Italian ragu. "Melissa, cancel my appointments for the next hour. I'm going to pay a quick visit to Little Italy." When Michael reached Mulberry Street, the queue for Claire's stall stretched for almost a block. He watched, intrigued, as she moved gracefully among the makeshift equipment, serving dishes that looked like they came from a storied restaurant, not a street stall. After 20 minutes of waiting, it was finally his turn. The first forkful of ragu instantly transported him back to his childhood, to the kitchen of his grandmother, Sophia Reed, one of New York's most respected chefs in the 1970s, before her mysterious disappearance. "That recipe," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Where did you get it?" Claire hesitated for a moment, her green eyes meeting his. "It's a family recipe," she replied cautiously. "Impossible, my goodness, he's dead. This is my grandmother's ragu, Sophia Reed. She never shared this recipe with anyone other than her family." Claire's face paled visibly. She knew that name. It was written on the first page of the cookbook, along with a dedication. "To my dear daughter Isabella, may these recipes keep our family together through the generations. Love, Sophia." "Isabella was my mother," Claire whispered, the realization hitting her like a bolt of lightning. Michael felt his world spin. Isabella, the name of his missing aunt, Sophia's only daughter who had cut ties with the family even before her grandmother's disappearance. "We need to talk," he said, looking around the busy street. "I have an important event tonight, and a proposal for you. But more importantly, I think we have some family history to unravel." Claire looked at the line of waiting customers and then at the man in front of her, a cousin she never knew she had, carrying the same intense gaze she saw in old photos of her mother. "Give me an hour to close the stall," she replied, sensing that her life was about to change drastically. While Claire started organizing her equipment, Michael made a few quick phone calls. Tonight's charity event could be more than just a gala dinner. It could be the start of a journey to uncover the truth about Sophia Reed's fate and the secrets that had kept her family apart for so long. The sun was beginning to set over Manhattan, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, as two people who until then had been strangers, but shared the same blood and the same passion for cooking, prepared to embark on a journey that would change their lives forever. The aroma of ragu alla napolitana still hung in the air, like a delicious ghost from the past, promising to reveal secrets long buried in the yellowed pages of an old recipe book. Michael watched Claire methodically organize her street stall, her precise movements revealing years of experience in the kitchen. As she worked, he couldn't help but notice the similarities with his Aunt Isabella. The same graceful gestures, the same shape of her face. How could he not have noticed before? "I'll need the recipe book," Michael said, breaking the silence. "For tonight's event." Claire stopped what she was doing, her expression hardening. "This book is all I have left of my mother. I understand, but those people tonight, they knew Sophia. Some of them may have clues about her disappearance." Michael hesitated before continuing. "Haven't you ever wondered why your mother kept our family a secret?" The question hit Claire like a punch in the gut. Of course she wondered. She had grown up with a mother who refused to talk about the past, who changed the subject when asked about her family. After Isabella's death 3 months ago, Claire had found only that recipe book in the attic, along with some old photos and yellowed newspaper clippings. "I have an hour to prepare for the event," Claire finally said, picking up a bag where she kept the precious book. "But on one condition, the book doesn't leave my hands." On the way to Luminescence, Michael explained the details of the charity event. The Hartford Foundation held an annual dinner to raise funds for children's hospitals, bringing together New York's elite. This year, the theme was Flavors of Memory, a coincidence that now seemed almost providential. When they arrived at the restaurant, Melissa, Michael's assistant, greeted them with a worried expression. "The guests are arriving in 2 hours, Mr. Reed. The kitchen is awaiting instructions." Claire followed Michael through the stainless steel doors of the industrial kitchen. The team stopped momentarily, watching the newcomer in her simple street-cook clothes. Michael noticed their discomfort and clapped his hands to attract their attention. "Everyone, this is Claire Bennett. She'll be our guest chef tonight. Follow her instructions as you would mine." Over the next 2 hours, Claire transformed the Luminescence kitchen. With the recipe book open on the counter, she guided the team with a natural authority that surprised even Michael. The menu was to be an unintentional homage to Sophia Reed. Ragu alla Napolitana, veal ravioli with sage sauce, and for dessert, a tiramisu whose secret lay in the book's marginal notes. While the dishes were being prepared, Michael noticed something curious. Between the pages of the book, small pieces of paper would occasionally fall out. Handwritten notes, old phone numbers, and what looked like codes or coordinates. Claire quickly picked them up and put them in her apron pocket. The guests began to arrive at 7 o'clock sharp. Among them, Michael recognized Alice Hartford, now 70, who had been a good friend of his grandmother. When the first course was served, he watched her reaction carefully. Alice put her fork to her mouth and froze. Her eyes filled with tears. "This ragu is impossible. Sophia has never shared this recipe with anyone." Michael approached her table. "Mrs. Hartford, I'd like to introduce someone. This is Claire Bennett, Isabella's daughter." Alice looked at Claire as if she saw a ghost. "Isabella, my God, we've been looking for her for years. Sophia never gave up." "What are you talking about?" Claire asked, sitting up. "My mother never mentioned." "Darling," Alice took Claire's hand, "your mother didn't abandon the family. She was protecting you. Sophia was investigating something dangerous. Isabella found out and had to run away." Michael felt a shiver run down his spine. "Investigating what?" Alice looked around nervously. "Not here, but that cookbook. Sophia wasn't just a chef. She used her recipes to hide information. Codes, numbers, places. It was her way of documenting what she discovered." Claire felt the weight of the papers in her pocket. The notes she found weren't just culinary notes. They were clues left by her grandmother. "There's a cafe on Christopher Street," Alice whispered. "Meet me there tomorrow at 9. There's a lot you need to know." The rest of the evening passed like a blur. The dishes were a resounding success, but both Michael and Claire barely noticed the compliments. Their minds were focused on Alice's revelations and the mystery that was beginning to unfold. When the last guest had left, Claire and Michael sat down at the restaurant's empty bar. Claire spread the notes found in the book on the counter. "Look at these," she pointed to a series of numbers. "They look like coordinates. And these words, they're not ingredients. They're places, dates." Michael studied the papers, his mind racing. Why would a respected chef like our grandmother be encoding information in a recipe book? And what kind of danger caused our family to split up? Claire closed her eyes, remembering her childhood, the constant changes of town, the fear in her mother's eyes when someone asked too many questions. I think we'll find out tomorrow that there's a lot more to this story than just lost recipes. The clock struck 3 in the morning when they finally left Luminescence. The city that never sleeps pulsed around them, indifferent to the secrets that were beginning to emerge. In the sky, heavy clouds promised rain, as if the weather itself anticipated the revelations that would come with the dawn. The next morning, Christopher Street was shrouded in a soft mist when Claire and Michael arrived at Café Dante, a historic establishment that seemed frozen in time since the 50s. Alice Harford was already waiting for them at a discreet table at the back, her elderly hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "Before we begin," Alice said quietly as soon as they were seated, "I need to know if you're prepared for what I'm about to reveal. Some truths are heavier than silence." Claire placed the recipe book on the table. "My mother died carrying these secrets. I need to know why." Alice sighed deeply. Sophia wasn't just a talented chef. In the late 1970s, she discovered something in the kitchens of some of New York's most exclusive restaurants. A money laundering ring that involved powerful people, including politicians and businessmen. Michael leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "The restaurants were fronts," Alice explained. Sophia began to notice strange patterns. Customers who never ate, astronomical bills for simple meals, phantom reservations. She started documenting everything. In the recipe book, Claire added, flipping through the yellowed pages. The codes between the recipes, exactly. Each recipe had a hidden meaning. The ingredients were codes for values, dates, names. Isabella found out when she found her mother's original notes. That's when everything fell apart. A waiter approached to take their orders, and the conversation paused momentarily. Claire watched the street through the window, thinking of her teenage mother, discovering a truth too big to bear. "What happened next?" Michael asked when they were alone again. Isabella confronted Sophia, wanting to help. But that same night, there was a break-in at their house. Isabella managed to escape out the back with some documents. Sophia disappeared. Claire felt her hands shaking. "That's why Mom never stayed in the same place for long. That's why we moved all the time." "Yes," Alice confirmed. "She was protecting you. And the recipe book. She must have realized its value when she found it among the documents she saved." Michael frowned. "But why didn't you ever say anything?" "All these years, because the network still exists, Michael. Different people, same methods. Last week, an investigative journalist who was following similar leads had a car accident." Claire and Michael exchanged glances. Chef Anderson's accident the night before suddenly took on a new perspective. "There's something else," Alice continued, pulling an envelope from her bag. "Sophia had a safe deposit box at a bank. She gave me the combination, saying it should only be opened if something happened to her. I've never had the courage to check, but maybe it's time." The envelope contained a piece of paper with a sequence of numbers and the name of a bank on the Upper East Side. Claire carefully put it away with the recipe book. "You need to be careful," Alice warned. "Powerful people have a lot to lose if the truth comes out." By the time they left the cafe, the fog had cleared, but Claire felt as if a new layer of mystery had settled over her life. Michael walked silently beside her, lost in thought. "What do we do now?" Claire asked, stopping at the corner. "First, we need to fully understand the codes in the book," Michael replied. "Then we visit that vault. But Alice is right. We need to be discreet." "I can examine the book tonight," Claire offered. "I have experience with recipes. I can identify unusual patterns. Come to my apartment in Tribeca. It's safer than staying in public places." As they were saying goodbye, a man in a dark suit across the street seemed particularly interested in their conversation. Claire noticed that he was talking on his cell phone without taking his eyes off them. "Michael," she whispered, "I think we're being watched. Don't look directly. Let's split up. Take a cab to the opposite side of town and then go back to Tribeca. I'll meet you at 7. Claire nodded, feeling the weight of the book in her bag like never before. As she walked towards 7th Avenue, she thought of her mother. All the nights she'd seen her crying alone, the sudden changes, the nervous glances over her shoulder. "I'm going to find out the truth, Mom," she muttered to herself, getting into a cab. "For you and Sophia." The taxi driver asked her where she was going, and Claire gave him a random address in Brooklyn. In the rearview mirror, She noticed a black sedan entering the flow of traffic behind them. The hunt had begun, and she would need all the cunning she had inherited from her family to survive what lay ahead. The mystery that had begun with a simple recipe book was about to turn into something much bigger and more dangerous than either Claire or Michael could have imagined. And somewhere in the city, Sophia Reed's secrets were waiting in a bank vault, ready to reveal truths that could change or end their lives. Michael's apartment in Tribeca was exactly as Claire had imagined, an elegant penthouse with a panoramic view of Manhattan. But that night, not even the spectacle of the city lights could distract them from their mission. Spread out on the mahogany dining table, dozens of papers formed a complex puzzle. "Look at this," Claire pointed to a specific page in the recipe book. "This risotto recipe. The quantities don't make sense. No one would use 3 cups of saffron." Michael leaned over the book, frowning. "The numbers look like coordinates, and spices can be codes for different types of transaction." "Exactly. And look how some of the words are underlined almost imperceptibly." Claire ran her finger over the yellowed page. "If we linked them all together, they form complete sentences." As they worked, Claire couldn't help noticing how much Michael looked like his grandmother's old photos. The same determined eyes, the same way of biting his lower lip when concentrating. It was strange to find familiar features in someone she had only known for 2 days. A distant clap of thunder startled Claire, reminding her of the black sedan that had followed her earlier. "Do you think we managed to lose whoever was following us?" "I'm not sure," Michael replied, getting up to check the windows. "But I installed extra security cameras this afternoon. Melissa is monitoring any suspicious activity." Claire returned her attention to the book, trying to ignore the feeling of imminent danger. On the page dedicated to desserts, something caught her eye. "Michael, come and see this. This cannoli recipe. The quantity numbers, if converted into coordinates, point to the financial district," Michael added, typing quickly on his tablet. "Specifically, the former National Bank building." "The same bank where Sophia had the safe?" "No, the safe is in another bank. But that can't be a coincidence." A noise at the door made them both freeze. Michael signaled Claire to stay silent while he checked the security monitor. It was just the night porter doing his rounds. "We need to check this address before we go to the vault," Claire whispered, still tense. "There might be a connection. Tomorrow morning. Today is too late, and we need to be cautious." Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Claire recognized from his own nervous ways. "In the meantime, keep deciphering the book. Each recipe could be a crucial piece." Claire nodded, turning back to the pages. An hour later, they had constructed an approximate timeline of Sophia's findings. The suspicious transactions began in 1977, mainly in upscale restaurants on the Upper East Side. The amounts increased exponentially until 1979, when the notes abruptly stopped. "The year she disappeared," Michael muttered. An urgent email from Melissa interrupted his thoughts. Someone had tried to break into Luminescence's security system earlier that day. "They're looking for something," Claire concluded. "Maybe they discovered our connection after the charity event. Or maybe they never stopped looking. They just needed confirmation." Michael began to walk around the room, thoughtful. "Chef Anderson, I need to find out more about his accident." Claire felt a chill. "Michael, what if it wasn't a coincidence that you ran into me? What if someone knew about the book and was just waiting for it to reappear?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Michael stopped by the window, watching the city below. "In that case, we need to outsmart them. We have something they don't, a real connection to Sophia." Claire picked up the recipe book, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. She codified this information in a way that only another chef could fully understand. Every variation in the recipes, every unusual ingredient substitution. "That's why you need to lead this," Michael said, turning to face her. "You have the culinary knowledge and the connection to the past. I have the resources and the contacts. Together, we could find out what happened." A plan began to form. They would visit the address in the financial district in the morning, disguised as potential investors. Then Sophia's safe. But first, they needed to make sure the recipe book was safe. "I know a place," Claire said, carefully tucking the book in her bag. "An old friend has a bookshop that specializes in rare books. She can make a detailed digital copy and keep the original in her safe. Michael agreed. The fewer people who know about it, the better. But we need to move fast. If they're really watching us, it won't take them long to make their move, Claire added. The clock struck almost midnight when Claire finally got ready to leave. Michael insisted on calling a car he trusted to take her, not wanting to risk another stalker. As they waited in the lobby, Claire noticed a framed photo on the wall. It was Sophia, much younger, in front of the first restaurant she opened in New York. Her smile was identical to Claire's. "We'll find out the truth," Michael promised, following her gaze. "For her, for her mother, for our family." Claire nodded, feeling the weight of family history on her shoulders. Tomorrow her real investigation would begin, and with it, the real risks. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't alone on this journey. She had an ally, a cousin, a connection to the past that she had tried so hard to understand. The car arrived, and as Claire drove off into the rainy Manhattan night, she couldn't help thinking that each recipe in her grandmother's book was like a thread in a larger fabric, a fabric that, when fully revealed, could expose a plot much darker than any of them had imagined. The next morning, Cornerstone Books on Grove Street was quiet when Claire and Michael arrived. The establishment, which specialized in rare works, occupied a historic three-story building with colorful stained glass windows and oak shelves that reached to the ceiling. "Ruby," Claire called out, her voice echoing between the shelves. A woman in her mid-40s, gray hair in a messy bun and tortoiseshell glasses, emerged from behind a pile of books. "Claire, long time no see." Ruby stopped as she noticed Michael. "Is this my cousin?" Claire added, still uncomfortable with the word. "We need your help with something delicate." At the back of the store, in a room full of scanning equipment, Claire explained the situation while Ruby examined the recipe book with expert hands protected by cotton gloves. "Fascinating," Ruby murmured, studying the pages. "There are almost imperceptible watermarks on some of the pages. And look at this." She pointed to small dots on some of the letters. "Dot code system, often used in confidential documents during the Cold War." Michael leaned in for a better look. "Can you scan it keeping those details?" "I could do better. My new scanner has ultraviolet technology. It can reveal markings invisible to the naked eye." While Ruby was working, Claire received a text message from Alice Hartford. "Careful. People asking questions about you at the charity event." Michael checked his phone. Melissa just confirmed. Someone tried to access the restaurant security cameras again. The scanner emitted a soft sound, and the first image appeared on the computer screen. Under ultraviolet light, previously invisible markings began to appear in the margins of the pages. "Oh my God," Claire whispered. "Their names. Dozens of them." Ruby adjusted some controls, improving resolution. Some seemed to have been deliberately erased, but the paper retains microscopic traces of the original ink. Michael frantically copied the revealed names onto his tablet. Many of these were important figures in the 70s. Politicians, businessmen. "Wait," he stopped, paling. "I recognize a few. They're still powerful today." A noise at the front door of the store made everyone freeze. Ruby checked the security cameras on her computer. "Two men in suits," she reported. "They don't look like normal customers." Claire quickly put the book away. How long to finish scanning? "At least another hour to get it right." Michael made a decision. "Claire, go with Ruby to finish it. I'll distract our friends up front." "Michael, I have experience dealing with difficult people. Besides," he smiled tensely, "I own restaurants. I know how to entertain." Ruby led Claire through a discreet door that led to the basement. "I have a conservation lab down here. More equipment, more privacy." As they descended, Claire could hear Michael's voice upstairs, his charismatic restaurateur personality in full action. The basement was surprisingly modern, with state-of-the-art equipment for restoring old books. "Why so much apparatus for a small bookshop?" Claire asked as Ruby restarted the scanning process. "Because I wasn't always just a bookseller," Ruby replied enigmatically. "Let's just say I have experience in preserving documents that some people would rather were gone." The pages of the recipe book continued to reveal their secrets under the ultraviolet light. In addition to names, account numbers began to appear, along with what looked like codes for meeting places. Your grandmother was meticulous, Ruby commented. Every detail coded so that it would look perfectly normal to anyone who didn't know what to look for. A muffled sound from upstairs made Claire fear for Michael, but soon his voice returned, still maintaining the facade of a helpful shopkeeper. Why have some names been erased? Claire asked, noticing a pattern. Probably the most dangerous ones, Ruby replied. Your grandmother must have realized that she needed to protect that specific information even more. The scanning process continued for another 40 tense minutes. Finally, Ruby saved the files on an encrypted drive and returned the book. I keep a backup copy on a secure server, she informed them. If anything happens to you, you'll know what to do, Claire added gratefully. When they went upstairs, they found Michael alone, apparently relaxed, but Claire noticed a tension in his shoulders. Our friends were disappointed not to find what they were looking for, he said simply. Back on the street, as they walked quickly towards the subway, Michael explained, they asked questions about the charity event about you. I pretended not to know anything other than the fact that I had hired a talented street chef. Did they believe you? For the time being. But we don't have much time. Claire checked the drive in her bag. We need to decode this quickly, and we still have to check that address in the financial district. And the safe, Michael added. But first, we need somewhere safe to examine what Ruby found. A group of tourists walked past them, taking photos, and Claire had an idea. I know a place. The last place anyone would look for corporate secrets and conspiracies. Michael raised an eyebrow, curious. The food truck park in Chelsea, Claire explained. My old stall is still there, run by a friend, hidden in plain sight, among hundreds of people. As they boarded the subway, Claire couldn't help but think of her grandmother, meticulously coding every page of that book, knowing that one day someone would need that information. Did she imagine that it would be her own grandchildren who would uncover her secrets? The underground train crossed Manhattan, and with each station it passed, Claire felt they were closer not only to discovering the truth about Sophia's disappearance, but also to understanding why that truth was still dangerous enough to make powerful people move in the shadows, decades later. The food truck park in Chelsea was buzzing with typical lunchtime energy when Claire and Michael settled down at a discreet table at the back. The aroma of different cuisines from around the world mingled in the air, creating the perfect camouflage for their discoveries. Michael, Claire waved to a tall, tattooed man operating his old food stall. I need a favor you owe me. Minutes later, they were settled in the small storage area behind the food truck, with Michael's laptop connected to the drive provided by Ruby. The scanned images of the cookbook revealed layers of information that weren't visible to the naked eye. Look at this. Claire pointed to a sequence of numbers next to a osso-buco recipe. If we combine it with the names that appeared under ultraviolet light, their dates and amounts, Michael added, typing quickly. Each transaction disguised as an order for special ingredients. Marco stood guard outside, pretending to organize stock while watching for any suspicious movement. The constant noise of the park and the chatter of the customers provided perfect cover for his investigation. Some of these names still appear regularly in the papers, Michael muttered, searching on his tablet. Senator Harrison, CEO of Midwest Holdings. Wait, he stopped, frowning. Midwest Holdings is a major investor in the Hartford restaurant chain. The Hartford's Charitable Foundation? Claire felt a chill. Do you think Alice knew? Maybe not. Big companies have multiple investors. But Michael hesitated, looking at a recent news item. The current CEO of Midwest took over in 1980, shortly after Sophia's disappearance. Claire examined more scanned pages. Among the dessert recipes, she found a series of notes that looked like geographical coordinates. Michael, all these locations are in abandoned industrial areas, perfect for discreet meetings. Or, he didn't complete the sentence, but Claire understood the dark implication. A sudden movement outside made Marco give his combined signal. 3 quick knocks on the stock door. Claire quickly closed her laptop while Michael put the drive away. 2 men in suits have just entered the park, Marco informed in a low voice. The same ones from last week who asked questions about you. Claire felt her heart race. We need to get out of here. There's a back way out, Marco pointed. It leads to an alley that connects to 10th Avenue. Michael checked his phone. Melissa just texted. Someone tried to access my bank records earlier today. They're closing in, Claire concluded. We need to get to the vault before they do. As they prepared to leave, Claire noticed something in the latest images they had examined. A repeated reference to Project Crystal. Wait, she paused, opening her laptop again. It appears in several different recipes, always along with the name of a restaurant. Crystal Room. Michael typed quickly on his cell phone. The Crystal Room was one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants in the 70s. It closed abruptly in 1979. The year Sophia disappeared, a sound of breaking glass outside made them jump. It was only a customer who had knocked over a glass, but the moment of tension reminded them of the imminent danger. Marco's going to create a distraction, Claire explained as they put their equipment away. When he starts an argument with another vendor, we'll go out the back. Michael nodded, checking the escape route on his phone. There's a car waiting for me at 10th and 25th. We need to get to the bank before it closes. The plan worked perfectly. While Marco got into a heated argument about territory with the owner of a neighboring food truck, Claire and Michael slipped discreetly out the back. The alley was deserted, except for a few cats rummaging through garbage cans. Do you think the Crystal Room was the center of everything? Claire asked as they walked quickly. It makes sense. An exclusive restaurant, select clientele, transactions that no one would question. Michael checked over his shoulder. The building still exists, you know. It was converted into offices in the 1980s. We need to investigate, but first, Claire stopped suddenly, pulling Michael behind a container. A black sedan was driving slowly down the parallel street. Same car as yesterday? Michael whispered. I'm not sure, but let's not risk it. They waited for the car to pass before continuing, now even more attentive. The weight of the discoveries was beginning to pile up. The Crystal Project, the Hartford connection, the industrial sites, the perfect timing between Sophia's disappearance and the corporate changes. We need to divide forces, Michael decided when they finally reached the car waiting for them. You go to the bank to check the vault. I'm going to investigate the old Crystal Room. It's too risky to split up, Claire protested. More risky is wasting time. They're one step behind us, but not for long. Claire knew he was right, but something was bothering her. How are we going to keep in touch? Michael handed her a new phone. Secure line, set up by Melissa. Any breakthroughs, we'll communicate only through here. The car began to move through the Manhattan traffic. Claire looked at the drive in her bag, thinking of all the layers of secrets yet to be revealed. Each discovery led to more questions, more obscure connections, more powerful people with a lot to lose. Michael, she called out as they were about to part. If something happens... Nothing will happen, he interrupted firmly. We're smarter than they are. Sophia has left us all the clues we need. We just need to put the right pieces together. As the car drove towards the bank on the Upper East Side, Claire couldn't help thinking that her grandmother had foreseen all this. The recipe book wasn't just a record of past crimes. It was a map to the truth, coded in the only way she knew her grandchildren would one day understand. The Beacon Trust Bank was a monument to wealth and discretion, with its granite facade and polished bronze doors. Claire adjusted the borrowed blazer Michael had insisted she wear, feeling out of place among the bankers and their wealthy clients. Can I help you? The receptionist smiled with studied politeness. Yes, I have authorized access to Vault 2174. Claire presented the documents that Alice Hartford had provided. Her heart was pounding as the clerk meticulously examined each piece of paper. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Michael entered the building that had once housed the Crystal Room. The Art Deco lobby had been preserved, but the rest of the building was all modern glass and steel. Using his identity as a gastronomic entrepreneur, he gained access to the building's historical archives to the facilities manager. Back at the bank, Claire followed an employee through the underground corridors to the vault room. Her new phone vibrated at a message from Michael. Archives show complete renovation in 1980. Walls demolished. Looking for original blueprints? Sophia's safe was in one of the oldest sections of the bank. Claire inserted the key and turned the combination Alice had provided. The mechanism responded with a satisfying click. Inside, she found a manila folder, a surprisingly modern USB stick, and a letter addressed to whoever finds the truth. With trembling hands, Claire opened the envelope. If you're reading this, it means that my suspicions were correct. The Crystal Project wasn't just a money laundering scheme. It was an operation to traffic in confidential government information. The Crystal Room was the perfect meeting point. Who would suspect politicians and businessmen dining in an exclusive restaurant? Claire photographed each page of the letter with her secure phone and immediately sent it to Michael. The USB stick contained photos, hundreds of them, showing seemingly innocent encounters at the restaurant, but with detailed notes on documents and information exchanged. Michael, she typed quickly. Sophia documented everything. It wasn't just money, it was state secrets. The reply came instantly. I found something. Original floor plan shows a secret room behind the cellar, totally acoustically insulated. A noise in the corridor made Claire freeze. Voices were coming closer, including one she recognized from the food truck park. She quickly put everything in her bag, except for a few photos that she hid inside her blazer. We need to leave. Now? Michael's message was urgent. The building's security cameras have just recorded some interesting visitors. Claire closed the safe and left calmly, passing two men in suits entering the safe room. She kept her pace controlled until she turned into the corridor, then accelerated towards the exit. On the street, a black car stopped abruptly next to her. The window rolled down, revealing Melissa, Michael's assistant. Getting quickly, Melissa ordered. We got problems. As the car drove through Manhattan, Melissa explained, someone hacked into our security system. They have photos of you and Michael at the charity event. They've been tracking your movements for the last few days. Claire examined the photos she had saved. One in particular caught her eye. It showed a man she recognized from recent news reports. The new FBI director in New York. Was he involved? He still is, Melissa corrected. Michael just found records of recent transfers using the same code system your grandmother documented. Claire's phone vibrated again. Michael had sent coordinates, an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn. I found mentions of this place in the Crystal Room archives. It's where they kept the original documents. It's a trap, Melissa warned. They know you're investigating. That's exactly why we need to go, Claire insisted. If there are still documents there, it would explain why they're so desperate to stop us. Melissa hesitated, then made a sharp turn towards the Brooklyn Bridge. Michael's on his way. I've got surveillance equipment in the trunk. We used to use it to monitor restaurant critics. The warehouse was a dilapidated building by the river. Claire and Melissa were watching from a safe distance when Michael arrived. The basement is still intact, he reported, showing old blueprints on his tablet. And look at this. The energy consumption has never stopped, even with the building abandoned. Someone still uses the place, Claire concluded. And we've just received an anonymous tip about an important meeting taking place there tonight, Melissa added, checking her phone. Michael and Claire exchanged glances. It was obviously a trap, but also their best chance of finding out the truth. We need help, Claire decided, picking up her phone. Ruby wasn't just an expert in rare books, remember? And Marco has contacts who could be useful. I have some friends in the press too, Michael added. If anything happens to us, the story goes public immediately. As the sun set over Brooklyn, the three of them planned their next move. Sophia's legacy had survived for decades in codes hidden in recipes. Now, it was their responsibility to expose the truth, not just about her disappearance, but about a conspiracy that had seemingly never ended. Tonight, Claire said, looking at the storage room, we find out everything or we join Sophia, Michael added darkly. The wind from the river stirred abandoned papers in the street, like ghosts from the past dancing around them. In a few hours, they would confront the same enemies their grandmother had faced. But this time, they wouldn't be alone. The plan was simple and, like most simple plans, dangerously vulnerable. Claire, Michael, and Melissa had spent the last 2 hours organizing every detail in the small, secure apartment Melissa kept in Brooklyn. Ruby had arrived with sophisticated surveillance equipment, and Marco had brought 3 trusted ex-military men who were now monitoring the perimeter of the warehouse. Heat signals show movement underground, Ruby reported, adjusting her monitors. At least 6 people have entered in the last 30 minutes. Claire studied the building plans Michael had obtained. The basement had an interesting peculiarity. In addition to the main rooms, There was a system of maintenance tunnels that connected the warehouse to an old port terminal. "It's our escape route if something goes wrong," Michael explained, tracing the path with his finger. "Melissa will be monitoring the cameras we've installed, and Marco has positioned his men at strategic points." Claire checked her new phone. A message from Alice Hartford flashed up on the screen. "Watch out for Hartford Jr. He's not who he appears to be." "Alice's son?" Claire showed Michael the message. "Why would she warn us about her own son?" "Because he took over the Hartford Foundation 5 years ago," Melissa interjected, typing rapidly on her laptop. "And since then, the same companies that appeared on Sophia's records have started making substantial donations to." The plan was to infiltrate during the supposed meeting, using the ventilation system Ruby had mapped out. Michael, with his experience in high-end restaurants, would be able to blend in naturally if they were discovered. Claire, for her part, knew every detail of Sophia's documented operations thanks to the cookbook. 9 o'clock, Ruby announced, checking her monitors. 3 more cars arriving, all armored. Claire felt her heart racing. In her bag, she carried the most important photos found in Sophia's safe, evidence that could expose decades of corruption and crime. Michael kept the drive with the digitized cookbook files in a secret compartment in his watch. "Remember," Melissa warned, "you have 15 minutes before the security systems reboot. After that, we go blind." The warehouse was a dark shadow against the Brooklyn night sky. Claire and Michael moved silently between abandoned containers, following Ruby's instructions through their headsets. "Ventilation entrance 3 meters to the right," Ruby instructed. "Cameras off in 3, 2, 1. Michael removed the grating with special tools while Claire watched. The ventilation tunnel was tight, but sustainable. As they crept along in the dark, they could hear muffled voices coming from somewhere below. "Movement in the main room," Melissa reported. Hartford Jr. just arrived with 2 more men. Claire reached the opening that led into a small archive room. Carefully, she removed the grill and climbed down, followed by Michael. The room was dark except for the light coming from under the door. "We need the original documents," a familiar voice echoed from the corridor. "If they connect the dots like old Sophia did." Claire and Michael exchanged glances. It was the voice of the FBI director who had appeared in the photos of the vault. 5 minutes to reboot the systems," Ruby warned in their ears. Moving quickly, they began to examine the shelves. Years of documents organized chronologically, but something was wrong. "Michael," Claire whispered, "these files are recent. The scam never stopped." "Claire," Michael called softly, pointing to a folder marked Project Crystal, Phase 2. "I think we found it." When they opened the folder, a photo fell to the floor. It was Sophia, not in the 1970s, but much more recent, maybe 10 years ago. Was she alive? "Systems rebooting in a minute," Melissa warned urgently. But before they could move, the door to the room opened. Hartford Jr. was standing there, a gun casually pointed in his direction. "I knew you'd come," he smiled. "My mother was always too sentimental about old Sophia. Couldn't keep her mouth shut, could she?" "Where's our grandmother?" Claire asked, her voice firm despite her fear. "Alive, for the time being. She's been our guest for a few years now. Useful for keeping certain people in line." He gestured with the gun. "Now the photos in the drive, please." Michael stepped forward. "If anything happens to us..." Yes, the story comes out," Hartford Jr. interrupted dismissively. "But who would believe it? It would just be another conspiracy theory on the internet." At that moment, the lights flashed, Ruby's signal. Claire took advantage of the distraction to knock over a shelf. While Michael advanced on Hartford Jr. "Now," Ruby shouted into her headphones. Chaos ensued. Alarms sounded. Emergency lights flashed. Claire grabbed her briefcase and the photos, rushing into the maintenance tunnel with Michael close behind. Gunshots echoed through the corridors. "Police on the way," Melissa reported. "Marco's activated his contacts. You have 2 minutes." Running through the dark tunnels, Claire held tightly to the evidence they had found. It wasn't just documents. It was the key to finding Sophia, alive somewhere. "To the right," Ruby directed. "Exit in 50 meters." When they emerged into the Brooklyn night, police cars were already surrounding the warehouse. Marco and his men had created a distraction on the other side of the building, allowing them to escape unnoticed. In the secure apartment, hours later, Claire and Michael were examining their findings. Project Crystal had evolved from simple information trafficking into something much bigger, a network of blackmail and manipulation that reached the highest levels of government. And Sophia documented everything, Claire muttered, studying the recent photos. That's why they kept her alive. Michael picked up his phone, dialing a number. Alice? We found her. She's alive. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I need you to tell us everything, Michael continued. No more secrets. Where are they keeping her? Alice's answer would change everything. Lake Tahoe. There's a private estate. I can take you there. Claire looked at Michael, determination in her eyes. The search wasn't over. It was just beginning its most dangerous phase. The property in Lake Tahoe emerged from the morning mist like a modern fortress of glass and stone. Claire, Michael, and Alice watched the mansion from their strategic position among the trees, while Ruby coordinated the operation through her headphones. 3 guards on the perimeter, cameras at every angle, Ruby reported. But I found a blind spot near the winter garden. Are you sure she's there? Claire asked Alice, who nodded gravely. Parford has kept Sophia here for years, disguised as his retired culinary consultant. Few know her true identity. Michael checked his watch. 5:45 in the morning. Hartford Jr. is still being held in New York, being questioned about the documents we found in the warehouse. We have a window of a few hours. The journey to Lake Tahoe had been a race against time. After the discovery in Brooklyn, they had immediately flown to Nevada, using resources that Ruby had provided through her mysterious contacts. Marco and his men remained in New York, ensuring that the evidence reached the right authorities. Movement in the house, Ruby warned. Card shift in 2 minutes. Claire adjusted the equipment Ruby had provided, a device that interfered with security cameras for short periods. Michael carried a briefcase with forged documents identifying him as a federal inspector. Alice, Claire held the elderly woman's hand. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Alice interrupted, her voice firm. Sophia's waited too long. She's coming home today. The plan depended on perfect timing. As the night shift guards left, and the day shift guards had not yet fully taken over, there would be a break of about 4 minutes. Now, Ruby commanded. Claire activated the jamming device as Michael strode confidently through the main entrance, his posture exuding authority. The remaining guard examined his papers with moderate interest. After all, following the events in New York, official visits were expected. Federal investigation into tax irregularities. Michael declared with studied naturalness. We need to check some records. Claire, meanwhile, had made her way around the property to the winter garden. Ruby guided her movements through the blind cameras, timing each step. Second door on the left, Alice directed through the handset. Sophia usually has breakfast in a music room. The interior of the mansion was a monument to discreet luxury. Claire moved silently through the corridors, her heart pounding. Every second was precious. The jamming device would only work for another 8 minutes. Then she heard it, a soft piano melody coming from a nearby room. Approaching, she saw through the ajar door an elderly woman sitting at the piano, her fingers dancing lightly over the keys. "Grandma," Claire whispered. Sophia Reed stopped playing, but didn't turn around. "I knew that one day someone would decipher my recipes," she said softly. "I was hoping it would be you, darling." "How?" "The extra pepper seasoning in the ragu," Sophia smiled, finally turning around. "Only Isabella did it like that. And you cook just like her." Claire fought back tears as she saw her grandmother for the first time. Sophia's eyes, although marked by time, shone with the same intensity as in the old photos. "We don't have much time," Claire said. Michael was distracting the guards, but Michael's here. Sophia stood up quickly. "My grandson, how he's grown." For minutes, Ruby warned into the earpiece. Claire led Sophia through the corridors, following Ruby's instructions to avoid the cameras that were starting to come back online. At the main entrance, Michael continued his performance as a federal investigator, keeping the guards busy with complex bureaucratic issues. Movement at the main gate, Ruby reported tensely. Car arriving. Claire and Sophia reached the winter garden when they heard altered voices at the entrance. Through the earpiece, they picked up fragments of the conversation. Hartford Jr. had been released. Exit compromised, Ruby warned. Plan B? Plan B involved a boat waiting on the lake, but required crossing 200 meters of exposed terrain. Michael, sensing the situation, stepped up his game, demanding to see more documents and delaying Hartford Jr. Did you document everything? Claire asked as she guided Sophia between the trees. Every transaction, every meeting, Sophia confirmed. They couldn't kill me. I was their insurance against internal betrayal. But now, a gunshot cut through the air. Michael had been discovered. Claire, run, his voice came through the earpiece. I've got everything under control. Sophia surprised Claire with her agility, running along the lake shore like someone decades younger. The boat was where Ruby had promised, camouflaged between tall reeds. More shots echoed around the property. Claire hesitated, wanting to turn back for Michael, but Sophia grabbed her arm. He's strong like his father, Sophia assured her. Trust him. The boat's engine came to life the moment they saw Michael emerge from the trees, running in his zigzag pattern as bullets hit the water around him. With a final leap, he reached the boat. Hartford Jr.? Claire asked as they sped across the lake. He accidentally ran into his own security system. Michael smiled, panting. And Ruby just confirmed it. The feds are on their way. Sophia watched the mansion dwindle in the distance. Decades of elegant captivity, finally over. The cookbook, she said softly. It worked exactly as I'd hoped. Claire took her grandmother's hand. Every recipe led us here. And now, Michael added, we have a much bigger story to tell. The sun rose fully over Lake Tahoe, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. In a few hours, headlines would explode across the country, exposing decades of corruption and crime. But at that moment, 3 generations of the Reeds finally reunited and found peace in the calm waters of the lake, knowing that the real work of rebuilding their family was just beginning. 3 months after their dramatic escape from Lake Tahoe, the kitchen of Claire and Michael's new restaurant was buzzing with energy. Legacy, located in an elegant historic building in Manhattan, was more than a dining establishment. It was a tribute to their family's history. The sauce still needs something, Claire murmured, tasting the ragu that was bubbling on the stove. Next to her, Sophia smiled, adding an extra pinch of Calabrian pepper, her secret touch that was now a family tradition. The official opening would be that evening, and the guest list included not only food critics, but also federal agents and prosecutors. The Hartford case had become one of the biggest political scandals of the decade, with ramifications that were still being uncovered. The journalists have arrived, Michael announced, entering the kitchen. Ruby is keeping them busy with the cookbook story. The famous book now took pride of place in a special display case in the restaurant, its pages revealing not only delicious recipes, but also the courage of a woman who turned her passion for cooking into a weapon against corruption. Hartford Jr. made a deal with the prosecution, Melissa informed us, checking her tablet. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he's handing over everyone involved in Project Cristal. Claire watched her grandmother, who continued to work in the kitchen as if the last 30 years of captivity had never existed. But the scars were there, visible in the quiet moments when Sophia stopped to watch the movement of the street through the restaurant's windows, savoring her newfound freedom. Alice has arrived, Marco announced from the doorway. The elderly woman entered leaning on a cane, carrying an old box. I found more documents in the attic, Alice explained, handing the box to Michael. Sophia wasn't the only one keeping records. Richard, my late husband, also documented everything. The revelations of the last few months had transformed not only their lives, but the entire political and business landscape of New York. Important executives had resigned, politicians announced sudden retirements, and a new generation of leaders emerged, promising transparency. Customers started arriving in an hour, Claire reminded us, turning her attention to the preparations. The opening menu was a journey through her family's history, each dish telling a part of their saga. Sophia approached her granddaughter, lovingly adjusting her apron. You know, when I created those codes in the recipe book, I dreamed that one day someone in our family would decipher them. But I never imagined it would bring us together like this. Michael joined them, bringing a special bottle of wine. A toast, he suggested, pouring 3 glasses. To the Reed family, past, present, and future, the sound of clinking glasses echoed through the modern kitchen, where state-of-the-art equipment coexisted harmoniously with vintage utensils that Sophia had brought from her old kitchen in the 70s. "We need to tell them," Claire said softly, looking at Michael. Her cousin smiled, nodding. "Tell them what?" Sophia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Legacy won't just be a restaurant," Michael explained. "We're turning the second floor into a culinary school. But not just any school. It will be a program for at-risk youth," Claire added. "To show that cooking could be more than a profession, it could be a form of transformation." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Like what cooking has done for our family?" The rest of the team began to arrive. Talented chefs that Michael and Claire had personally recruited, including some Claire had met in her food truck days. Each brought their own story, their own contribution to the new chapter they were writing. Ruby, who had become a close friend and advisor, oversaw the restaurant security as efficiently as she had once protected its rare books. Marco, now operations manager, ensured that everything ran smoothly. When the first guests began to arrive, the aroma that filled the room was a symphony of memories and promises. Sophia, in her element, ran the kitchen with the grace of decades of experience, while Claire and Michael circulated among the guests, sharing not only exceptional dishes, but also fragments of their extraordinary history. "For dessert," Claire announced to the guests, "we've prepared something special, a recipe that was never in the book. Sophia Reed's last creation before her disappearance, finalized just today." The waiters served elegant dishes where a seemingly simple dessert hid layers of complexity, just like the Reed story itself. "Tiramisu revelation," Sophia explained, joining the guests. "Because sometimes the deepest truths are hidden in the simplest recipes." At the end of the evening, when the last customer had left and the staff was starting to clean up, Claire found her grandmother sitting at the bar, leafing through the old recipe book. "Thinking of writing another one?" Claire asked, taking a seat next to her. "No," Sophia smiled, closing the book. "This chapter is closed. It's time to create new memories, new recipes. But this time, no secret codes." Michael joined them, bringing 3 slices of tiramisu revelation. "Here's to our new recipe for life," he proposed. As they savored their dessert, watching the lights of Manhattan through the windows of Legato, Claire realized that some stories don't need an ending, just a new beginning. The restaurant, like her family, would continue to evolve, blending the best of the past with the promises of the future. And somewhere between the worn pages of an old cookbook and the dreams of a new generation, the Reeds had finally found their true heritage, not in the secrets they kept, but in the love they shared for cooking and for each other.